Welcome to I Know That's Right. My name is Dr. Keisha Savoy, and I have the joy of facilitating this series where I get to sit down with people whose work helps us tell the truth more clearly about healing, leadership, identity, well-being, and the lives we are actually trying to live. This is a space for honest conversation, deeper reflection, and the kind of insight that gives language to what many of us have known in our bodies, our spirit, and our lived experience long before we had the words or the research for it. Because sometimes the truth does not just make sense in your mind, it lands in your body. And when it does, the response is simple. I know that's right. I'm glad you're here. And here's the best part of today's show. I am honored to be joined by Myira Khan. She is someone I have the joy of having a sisterhood with. She's someone whose work I deeply admire, and I'm not the only one. Myira Khan is an award-winning accredited counselor, supervisor, coach, trainer, and founder of the Muslim Counselor and Psychotherapist Network, an author of Working Within Diversity, a reflective guide to anti-oppressive practice, and her newest work, The Muslim Guide to Well-Being, a faith-sensitive guide to nurturing personal, spiritual, and relationship growth. Myira's work invites us into deeper reflection on anti-oppressive practice, faith-sensitive well-being, identity, healing, and what it really means to support people in ways that are thoughtful, affirming, and grounded. I am really looking forward to this conversation because she and I have dialogues all the time. So it feels like you guys are joining us in our living room as we're discussing our latest attempt to take over the world and build a warmer, more equitable space. Myira, welcome to I Know That's Right.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. And like you've just said, Dr. K, yeah, I feel like people are now going to be looking in on just the latest segment episode of our chat and our dialogue together. Yeah,
It's
I'm
true.
excited
It's
to be here.
true. It's true. It's wonderful to have you. Well, let's open up in this way for the watchers, listeners, community that is new to your face and your work and meeting you for the first time. What feels most important for people to understand about who you are, what you do, and what motivates your work?
And I think I'm going to answer that in the reverse order because as I sat here and I was listening to you introducing me and introducing my work, the thing that really grounds me and really sticks with me is my work is about us being whole people in our full humanity. So when I talk about anti-oppressive practice, I describe myself as an anti-oppressive practitioner, which then includes all of those various guises. Yes, counselor, therapist, supervisor, writer, author, presenter, speaker, etc., etc. But what is at the heart of it is understanding that in every single space we are in every single moment of connection we are with somebody else, we are showing up in our full identity. And so to be anti-oppressive in my approach and in how I work is to honor not only that me and my full identity showing up in this space between me and you right now, but then equally honoring and valuing and respecting your identity, your truth, your lived experience, and that is what I am then connecting with, and that's what you are showing up in and with and bringing to the space.
I think that is the perfect segue for the deeper conversation we're going to have around community. Because if we're looking at this from an anti-oppressive, showing up as a whole person perspective, then I think there's room for a really dynamic conversation of what that means when we come together collectively. And I'm not just speaking on the global majority, but I'm talking about humanity overall. And so my question is, When people invite us into community, what do you think they believe they're offering? And when I say us, what's really popular right now? A lot of global virtual spaces, right? I think COVID sort of ushered in and normalized having a virtual community. And I would even say before that, video game culture, the online, the Twitches, and et cetera, et cetera. It is becoming very normal for these digital spaces, but they become these very vast, very diverse spaces. And I think we may be using the label of community as a catch-all, but I think there's a little more nuance than that. Would you mind speaking to it?
Yeah. Uh, And I love this distinction then that you're making, because being in a virtual space does not automatically equal community. I think we're talking about two distinct spaces. We're talking about virtual spaces that infinite digital online virtual spaces, of which some of them then are community and offer community. And I think for me, the distinction between the two is the intention, the nature, the quality of our connection and relationship with one another. And I think what community then is speaking to, and in a way then prioritizes, is the relational aspect of being in that space together. So, as you said, if we think about all those virtual spaces where you all might be on a live video game together, it's not necessarily prioritizing relationship between two people or in a group. I think when we show up in a space that is intentionally foregrounding, intentionally prioritizing community,
Mm,
I think then the piece we're speaking to then is a piece of connection and relationship. And those are the things then that are being kind of prioritized in community spaces.
mm. Then what can shared identity, no, sorry, why can shared identity create a sense of closeness without actually creating safety? Building on what you just shared, if that is the case, because it is two different things, it seems like we have this assumption that our shared identity automatically creates closeness without actually creating safety. When I think about the mental health space, when I think about the trauma space, we all have a shared identity of we have overcome something, or we're still dealing with something, or we have encountered some sort of trauma. Like that is the equal opportunity employer of everyone's experience. And we have that shared identity and we can come into these spaces. But I don't think we actually have named, clearly identified, or made it normal to be as intentional about shared identity as we are about creating a sense of shared safety. And so that's where my next question comes to. Why can shared identity create a sense of closeness without actually creating a sense of safety?
Yeah, I love this question because I think you're speaking to all of the assumptions, projections, transferences, conscious or unconscious needs, wants, and desires
Mm,
when we get into a space or a community space where we have shared or similar or common identities. What I mean by that is that it's the assumption that just because we have a part of my identity that is similar or close to a part of your identity, that there is then an assumption then that sameness equals safety.
mm,
And they are two completely different things. I can absolutely be in a community space. Let's say, for ease of example, I can be in a community space full of other global majority racially minoritized people, that being the common denominator in our shared identity. But just because we have what in my world I call cultural closeness, just
mm,
because we have a identity closeness, it doesn't automatically mean that what gets removed from the space is harm. It doesn't automatically mean that when we walk into that room that we leave our ability to harm others at the door.
Mm.
And I think it's this idea that somehow the good and the bad parts of us get split. That because we have a similarity, therefore only my good parts are going to show up. And therefore only your good parts are going to show up. And they're the only parts of us that are going to be in community or connection together. And somehow then we make maybe this assumption then that any harm that I might do to somebody or any degree to which I might be unsafe for somebody can't possibly be present because we are similar. And so we end up doing something, I think, to our identities that means because our closeness is shared or similarity, we are close through similarities, that somehow anything that we might do to each other then can only be good and positive. And I think that's actually really dangerous for the
Mm.
very reason then that what then happens to the bad? What then happens to our ability to harm or hurt people, our
Mhm.
ability to rupture relationships, our ability to express prejudices,
Mhm.
racism, or any
Mhm.
isms in that space? It's almost as if we go, they're the elephants in the room that continue then to get ignored.
Mhm.
Yeah, so quite dangerous.
I definitely want to linger here because in that umbrella of safety, what I've seen happen in real life is a rupture occurs and people don't know how to handle it. It is a diverse community, but it's mostly white presenting. That is the majority. And when someone from the global majority speaks up and they call out a prejudice, they call out a microaggression, they call out a bias, implicit or explicit, if this safety issue has not been addressed, what I've seen happen in real time is defensiveness, over explaining, and nothing that acknowledges the harm or repairs the lost sense of safety that was verbalized as a result of the rupture. There is more of a desire to address the community. Let's go to a current event. At the time of this recording, it wasn't that long ago that two African American actors um, who present as, Black we're in the UK at the BAFTA Awards, and one of those actors is an elder in the acting community, has been in the field for 30 some odd years, highly respected. The other one is younger, but is very much at the top of the global space and strongly looking to be an Oscar nominee. And I'm going to leave it there. While they were on stage presenting another award category, someone in the audience yells out a racial slur, and it's unmistakable and it's recorded. What the award space did, and here's that same language, it was a shared community of people in the entertainment industry. It was someone within that community who presents as white saying a racial slur to other members in that community who present as members of the Black diaspora. And what the award ceremony chose to do immediately was apologize to the audience. Um, Call it, Tourette's, and thank them for their patience while saying nothing to the African American men who the harm occurred to, who the rupture was directed to, and their sense of safety was completely invisible. And so that's what I hear you speaking to when you talk about the danger. And I just want to give you the freedom to take that in any way you wish.
So again, it's interesting because I kind of actually want to make a distinction between the two parts of that rupture because interestingly, I think because something happens in us sharing this example in which I can feel the pull to want to go, well, it's because of Tourette's. And it's interesting that there is a part that goes, well, we can explain it of why it happened.
Mm.
And absolutely, that is a truth. It happened because of that. I think the piece then, that is the piece that I think we're then speaking to is, it's what happens as a consequence of it. And this is part of my work. When I talk about anti-oppressive practice, I talk about the ability to sit and hold two truths simultaneously. To be anti-oppressive is to hold my truth and your truth equally, simultaneously. They both can be true at the same time. Nothing about our truths are mutually exclusive. So this is a wonderful example of us applying the two truths principle. One truth, or the first truth, is the reason it happened was because of someone's disability. And I can hold that as a truth, that it happened because of Tourette's. Simultaneously, I can also hold a second truth in which the consequence of that behaviour meant that two people, the two Black actors on stage, were harmed by it. They would have been impacted by it. They both then would have had to have navigated the fallout from it. And so I first of all want to hold the two truths simultaneously, because the harm is not explained away by the first truth. Their harm, the rupture, the fallout afterwards, the explaining, the statements, everything that happens, all the debates and discussions that follow are to do with the second truth. But what we can't do, and what we don't do, and what we won't do and shouldn't do, is minimize, dismiss, and discard and explain away that second truth of all the harm and the rupture by minimizing it because of the first truth. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's to hold both. And so I think what we're speaking to here then, in talking about being in community together, even when there is common denominators that bring us into that community, because they were all from the entertainment industry, the similarity between them does not dismiss the ability for harm to have happened because it happened. So that's the first thing I want to speak to about it. The second thing then is, and what you've just said, Dr. Kay, in the fallout, the consequences, the ripple effects, is that the apology then was given to an audience, to kind of the rest of the community, and not to the two people that were harmed. And I want to speak to that from a place of whose safety, in a way, it's posing it as a question, whose safety, and I think more importantly than that, whose comfort is being spoken to. Because in making the audience feel acknowledged, that their discomfort is being acknowledged through the apology, in their potential feelings of now feeling unsafe in the space, they are the people whose discomfort, feelings of unsafety are being reassured first. And in a way, where it leads me to, and what it makes me think about, is whose pain gets prioritized. And I'm thinking about the distinction between white tears and brown and black tears, white harm and pain, black harm and pain, between what might be defined by Reshma Menikin as clean pain and dirty pain. Whose pain gets cleaned, process navigated, digested in a way to make it palatable, to make it okay? Who gets regulated? Who gets left with the undigested, unmetabolized, dirty pain to process themselves? The two black actors on stage. So there's something here quite insidious that's about who is being looked after in this space. So whilst there is a common denominator, we're all in this space together because we're all in the entertainment business. It's a great example of, whilst we have a common denominator in this space, not everybody is being looked after in the same way. And not everybody's felt experience of being in the space is being treated as their truth. Some people's truths are being dismissed, discarded, deprioritized next to other people's truth, other people's feelings, and certain people get valued over others. When I talk about certain people, there is that racial divide happening here.
I knew we were going to have a powerful conversation. And for the listening audience or the watching audience, we will have a part two. But my final question for this part one aspect of our conversation is moving towards repair. For people like myself, in the work that I do with Masters events, Common Threads, Dr. Keisha Cares, all of the things that I largely lead are community centered and they're open to the global majority. And they also include any and all within the human experience. What should people like myself keep in mind when we're thinking about community, when we're thinking about safety, when we're thinking about rupture and repair? Because we've touched on first of all, identifying the difference, first of all, acknowledging the reality, secondly, understanding that we need to be able to hold two things at once and not address one person's pain over someone else's, right? Like you referred to Resmaa Menakem's work, definitely a great example. So let me use his language. How do we begin to nibble on these big issues of community and safety and repair? What are the things we should play with? What are the tools we should allow ourselves? And I use the word play because it's almost egotistical to assume that you can solve this because the dynamic of human interactions is always changing and how people understand rupture is definitely impacted on what they understand as correct or overstepping or rude, etc., etc. So I know I've said a lot, but I wanted to give you as much bandwidth to play with, and you can address any aspect of what I'm sharing in terms of what are the steps we should begin to think about or play with when we're thinking about how to create a safe community or a community that allows people to be their whole selves to bring us full
Mm.
circle.
Yeah. And the point I was going to make, I think you've just in what you just in that last moment just said there, Dr. K, the distinction, it is absolutely the distinction between the phrase creating safe spaces versus creating spaces for people to feel safe or safe enough in. There is a huge difference between the two. And I think this goes back to the very beginning of this conversation. One of the biggest, I think, myths, assumptions, projections that we bring into spaces of community is the idea that the community space creates safety and that the people in power or in charge of that space create safe spaces. Speaking to ego and arrogance and power and privilege, I'm going to dispel all of that by saying we cannot create safety for other people. What we can do instead is create spaces that then have the good enough experiences and relationships within them
Mm,
for people to feel safe in them. As
mm,
somebody that runs a network, as somebody that facilitates community spaces all the time, I never say that I can create safe spaces because that is a huge assumption on my behalf that I can guarantee safety for other people. And what I've learned in my 16 plus years of being a therapist is I cannot make somebody feel any particular way. It's
mhm,
up to us, our individual experience, our individual truth
mhm,
to know how we feel in any given space. So the first thing is shifting away from this idea that we create safety or create safe spaces because we cannot guarantee that. Instead, the moment we shift into thinking about how can I show up, how can my individuality, my identity, how I'm relating to people in this space, how does my identity show up? And what's my intention showing up in a space based on all of those aspects and parts of me? How do I then support a space for other people to feel safe with me? How am I showing up as safe? So it's not about actually focusing on is the other person feeling safe or not. It's about what's within my ability and power? Within my ability and power is to show up as a safe person. That's the work I need to do for myself, and then to be able to bring that into the space. So it's making that distinction. So for me, first of all, it's a focus on how do I show up as a safe enough person, first of all for myself, and then for other people. And then can I sit with the reality, like you were saying? Can I sit with the reality? Can I sit with the whole humanity, the whole individuality, and the
Mhm.
whole truth of the other person or people that I'm in that space with? Because I need to, and I want to be able to hold each of their truths, especially when that includes them feeling unsafe or not safe enough in a space with me.
Mm.
And it's not for me then to make people feel safe. I can't make people feel safe.
Right.
What I can then do is, like you were saying earlier, have that dialogue with them,
Hmm.
be in connection. That's the actual genuine part of being in community. It's being in that genuine dialogue, connection, and community that we can then co-create an experience for people then to move towards safety and to feel safety. But I can't make that a given at the beginning.
Mm-mm.
Safety is felt. It's
Yes,
created in the experience of being in the space. It's not
absolutely.
like I can't bring it as a guaranteed default, like from the minute one we open up a space.
Mhm.
It gets felt and experienced only once we're in the space.
What I'm taking away from part one of this conversation is safety is like trust. It's earned. It's built over time through experiences, through how we handle moments of rupture. And I thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights, your clarity, the depth of your work. And I thank everyone who joined this conversation. We have part two where we have more voices joining in. And I think that conversation is going to really be solution oriented, continuing to think about how can we show up as trustworthy people so that people can begin to feel safe around us. Because leaning into this language of, I don't get to decide when something is safe, I get to present myself as trustworthy. And if I show up as trustworthy, then I hope that the community we build together gives a sense of safety. And I think that is a phenomenal way of looking at it that the conversation really hasn't touched on overall. And I hope that that is where we can continue to move the dialogue when we go into part two. So, Myira, again, thank you so much for joining us. For people who want to follow you or get in touch with your work or even find out about how they can work with you directly. Can you share some information on where people can find you or the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I always say that I'm easily Googleable. So my website is myrakhancounselling.co.uk. And then I'm also across all socials. And again, search me on any of those platforms, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Myra Khan or Myra Khan Counselling, and you will easily find me.
Absolutely. And we'll be sure to put that information in the caption and session notes. In the meantime, take great care of yourself until our next sisterhood conversation. Thank you for joining me on I Know That's Right. Yeah, we got it done.
Look at that. Pros at this.